Twilight descended upon the gleaming skyscrapers of New York City, casting long shadows across the bustling streets below. Nijoni Blackhorse stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her corner office, her reflection a stark contrast to the sea of suits and ties that filled the financial district. Her long black hair, adorned with a single turquoise clip, cascaded down her back, a reminder of the heritage she carried within the concrete jungle. As the last rays of sunlight disappeared, Nijoni's dark eyes narrowed, focusing on a sleek, black limousine pulling up to the curb across the street. A tall, imposing figure emerged, his presence commanding attention even from this distance. Wakan Greywolf, CEO of Apex Industries and the most eligible bachelor in the city, moved with the fluid grace of a predator. Nijoni's breath caught in her throat. Tomorrow she would come face to face with the man who had become both her obsession and her greatest challenge. As the newly appointed head of mergers and acquisitions for Rivera Corp., it was her job to negotiate a deal that could make or break both their companies. But there was more at stake than just business. A secret burned within her, one that threatened to consume everything she had worked for. A soft knock at the door broke her reverie. "Ms. Blackhorse, the files you requested on Apex Industries." "Thank you, Jen. You can leave them on my desk," Nijoni replied, her voice steady despite the turbulent emotions roiling beneath the surface. As her assistant quietly departed, Nijoni moved to her desk, fingers hovering over the thick manila folder. Inside lay the culmination of months of discreet investigation, financial reports, news clippings, and whispered rumors about Wakan Greywolf and his meteoric rise to power. But it was the last page that drew her attention, a grainy photograph that seemed out of place among the corporate documents. The image showed a much younger Wakan, his face lined with grief, standing before a burning building on what appeared to be a reservation. In his arms he cradled a bundle of blankets, and even through the poor quality of the photo, Nijoni could make out the tiny hand reaching up to touch his face. Her heart raced as she traced the outline of the child. Could this be the key to unraveling the mystery that had haunted her family for generations? The prophecy spoken by her grandmother echoed in her mind. When the wolf who denies his nature meets the woman who embraces hers, the balance of two worlds will hang in the balance. Nijoni's phone buzzed, startling her from her thoughts. A text message flashed across the screen. "The spirits are restless. Be careful, little sister. The path you walk is treacherous. Ahanu." A chill ran down her spine. Her brother's warning was clear, but she had come too far to turn back now. Tomorrow's meeting wasn't just about a merger. It was about uncovering the truth behind Wakan Greywolf's carefully constructed facade. As she gathered her things to leave, a gust of wind rattled the windows, carrying with it the faint howl of a wolf. Nijoni froze, her senses on high alert. It was impossible. They were in the heart of Manhattan. And yet, the mournful cry seemed to call directly to something deep within her soul. In that moment, she knew her life was about to change irrevocably. The game of cat and mouse she had been playing with Wakan was about to become far more dangerous and far more personal than she had ever imagined. Stepping into the elevator, Nijoni steeled herself for what was to come. She was a daughter of the Dene, the Navajo people, and she carried the strength of her ancestors with her. Whatever secrets Wakan Greywolf was hiding, whatever lies he had built his empire upon, she would uncover them all. As the elevator doors closed, sealing her fate, Nijoni whispered a prayer to the spirits. "Guide me on this journey, and give me the courage to face the truth, no matter how painful it may be." The descent began, both literal and metaphorical, as Nijoni plunged into a world where ancient magics collided with modern ambitions, and where the line between predator and prey blurred with each passing moment. Unbeknownst to her across the city, Wakan Greywolf stood on the balcony of his penthouse, his piercing gaze fixed on the twinkling lights of the financial district. A low growl rumbled in his chest as he sensed the approaching storm, not of rain and thunder, but of secrets long buried and truths about to be unearthed. "So," he murmured to the night air, "the game begins." Destiny's wheels were now in motion, spinning toward an inevitable confrontation that would shake the foundations of both the human and supernatural worlds. And at the center of it all stood Nizhoni and Wakan, two souls bound by a prophecy neither fully understood, but both were powerless to escape. The night deepened, shrouding the city in shadows that seemed to whisper of ancient magics and forgotten oaths. Tomorrow would bring the dawn of a new era, one that would test the limits of loyalty, love, and the very nature of what it meant to be human. Anticipation hung heavy in the air, electric and charged with possibility. For in the world of shifters and spirits, of corporate titans and hidden legacies, nothing was ever as it seemed. And as the first light of a new day approached, both Nizhoni and Wakan prepared for a battle that would determine not just their futures, but the fate of two intertwined worlds. The stage was set, the players in position. Let the dance of deception begin. Morning light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling, windows of Apex Industries' conference room, casting a golden glow on the sleek mahogany table. Nizhoni Blackhorse sat poised at one end, her fingers lightly drumming a rhythm only she could hear. The air crackled with tension as executives from both companies filed in, their hushed whispers creating a backdrop of nervous energy. Suddenly, the room fell silent. Wakan Greywolf strode in, his presence commanding instant attention. Dressed in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit, he exuded power and control. But it was his eyes that captivated Nizhoni, piercing amber orbs that seemed to glow with an inner fire. "Ms. Blackhorse," Wakan's deep voice resonated through the room as he extended his hand. "A pleasure to finally meet you in person." Nizhoni rose, meeting his gaze unflinchingly. "Mr. Greywolf, the pleasure is mine." As their hands touched, an electric current seemed to pass between them. Nizhoni's breath caught in her throat, her senses overwhelmed by his presence. For a fraction of a second, she could have sworn she saw Wakan's eyes flash with a primal golden light. The meeting commenced, a dance of numbers and projections, of carefully worded proposals and thinly veiled power plays. But beneath the corporate veneer, a different game was unfolding. Every time Nizhoni spoke, she felt Wakan's intense gaze upon her, as if he were trying to peel back the layers of her soul. "Your proposal is ambitious, Ms. Blackhorse," Wakan remarked during a lull in the presentations. "But I wonder if Rivera Corp truly understands the unique challenges that come with partnering with Apex Industries." There was a weight to his words that sent a shiver down Nizhoni's spine. "I assure you, Mr. Greywolf, we've done our due diligence. In fact, I'd say we understand more than you might expect." A flicker of something, surprise, concern, passed across Wakan's face before his mask of cool confidence slipped back into place. "Is that so? Well then, perhaps we should continue this discussion in private. My office after the meeting?" Nizhoni nodded, her heart racing. This was the opening she had been waiting for. As the meeting adjourned, Nizhoni felt a hand on her arm. She turned to find Ahanu, her brother and Rivera Corp's head of security, looking at her with concern. "Be careful, Nij," he whispered. "There's something off about Greywolf. I can feel it." Nizhoni squeezed his hand reassuringly. "I know what I'm doing, big brother. Trust me." But as she followed Wakan to his private elevator, doubt began to creep in. Was she truly prepared for what lay ahead? Wakan's office was a study in contrasts, ultra-modern furnishings juxtaposed against artifacts that spoke of a rich cultural heritage. A dream catcher hung in one corner, its feathers stirring in an unfelt breeze. "Impressive view," Nizhoni remarked, gesturing to the panoramic vista of the city skyline. "Indeed," Wakan replied, moving to stand beside her. "But I find myself more intrigued by the view right in front of me." His proximity was intoxicating, a heady mix of masculine power and something wild, untamed. Nizhoni steeled herself, remembering her purpose. "Mr. Greywolf." "Wakan, please." "Wakan," she corrected, turning to face him. "I think it's time. We spoke frankly. There's more at stake here than just a business merger, isn't there?" For a moment, Wakan's carefully constructed facade seemed to waver. "What exactly are you implying, Ms. Blackhorse?" Nizhoni reached into her briefcase, withdrawing the photograph she had discovered the night before. I think you know exactly what I'm implying. Alpha. The change was instantaneous. Wakan's eyes blazed gold, a low growl rumbling in his chest. In the blink of an eye, he had Nijoni pinned against the window, his face inches from hers. Who are you, really? He snarled, his voice a mixture of anger and something deeper, more primal. What do you know? Heart pounding, Nijoni met his gaze defiantly. I know that you're not just a billionaire CEO. I know about the fire on the reservation, about the child you saved, and I know about the curse that binds your kind. Wakan's grip loosened slightly, surprise evident on his face. How? Because, Nijoni said softly, I'm bound by the same curse. I'm a shifter too, Wakan, and I think I might be the key to breaking the curse that's plagued your pack for generations. The revelation hung in the air between them, electric and charged with possibility. Wakan stepped back, his eyes never leaving Nijoni's face. If what you're saying is true, he said slowly, then everything is about to change. Before Nijoni could respond, a commotion erupted outside the office. The door burst open, revealing a wild-eyed man brandishing a gun. Werewolf, the intruder shouted. Your time has come. The spirits demand justice. Time seemed to slow. Wakan moved with inhuman speed, placing himself between Nijoni and the gunman. As the first shot rang out, Nijoni felt a surge of power coursing through her veins. Her vision sharpened, her senses heightened, and then, in a blur of motion and primal instinct, both she and Wakan began to change. The gunman's eyes widened in terror as he faced not two humans, but a pair of snarling, powerful wolves. One midnight black, the other silver gray. As security alarms blared and shouts echoed from the hallway, Nijoni locked eyes with Wakan. In that moment, a silent understanding passed between them. Whatever secrets and lies had brought them to this point, they were now inextricably bound together. The dance of deception had evolved into something far more dangerous and far more thrilling. As they faced the threat before them, both Nijoni and Wakan knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The stage was set for a battle that would determine not just their futures, but the fate of two intertwined worlds. And as the chaos unfolded around them, one thing became crystal clear. The greatest adventure of their lives was only just beginning. Chaos reigned in the aftermath of the attack. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder as police and emergency services rushed towards Apex Industries. Inside Wakan's office, shattered glass crunched underfoot as security personnel swarmed the area, their faces a mix of confusion and barely concealed fear. Nijoni and Wakan, now back in human form, stood amid the wreckage, their clothes torn and disheveled. The would-be assassin lay unconscious on the floor, subdued by their swift and coordinated attack. As the gravity of the situation settled over them, their eyes met, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. Mr. Werewolf, are you all right? A breathless security guard burst into the room, his gaze darting between his boss and the scene of destruction. Wakan straightened, his alpha presence filling the space. I'm fine, Johnson. Make sure this man is taken into custody and that no one speaks to the press. Ms. Blackhorse and I need to debrief in private. With a curt nod, the guard ushered his team out, leaving Nijoni and Wakan alone once more. Well, Nijoni said, brushing glass shards from her skirt. I suppose this wasn't quite the merger negotiation you had in mind. A ghost of a smile played at the corners of Wakan's mouth. No, it certainly wasn't. But then again, you're not the adversary I expected. Either are you, Ms. Blackhorse? Nijoni met his gaze steadily. Nijoni, please. And no, I'm not. But I think we both know this goes far beyond corporate takeovers now. Wakan moved to a hidden panel in the wall, revealing a state-of-the-art safe. He extracted a bottle of amber liquid and 2 glasses. I think we're going to need this for the conversation ahead. As he poured, Nijoni took a moment to study him. In the harsh fluorescent light, she could see the weight of secrets etched into the lines of his face. Despite his powerful presence, there was a vulnerability in his eyes that tugged at her heart. You mentioned a curse, Wakan said, handing her a glass, and that you might be the key to breaking it. Explain. Nijoni took a sip, the whiskey burning a path down her throat. It's a long story, one that goes back generations. My grandmother was a seer, respected among our people for her visions. On her deathbed, she spoke of a prophecy, a curse that bound two packs, keeping them from their true power and condemning them to lives of secrecy and half-truths. Wakan's eyes narrowed. And you believe this curse affects my pack? How can you be sure? Because, Nijoni said softly, the other pack is mine. The Black Horse clan has carried this burden for centuries, just as your Grey Wolf pack has. We've been enemies for so long that we've forgotten why. She reached into her pocket, pulling out a small, intricately carved stone. This is a piece of the Sky Stone, passed down through my family. Legend says it holds the power to unite what was broken, to heal ancient wounds, but it can only be activated by the joining of two alpha bloodlines. Wakan stared at the stone, a mix of emotions playing across his face. I've heard whispers of such an artifact. My father, he spent years searching for it before he died. A heavy silence fell between them, filled with the weight of history and the possibilities that lay ahead. So what now? Wakan asked, his voice low and intense. You came here, under false pretenses, digging into my past, my secrets. Why should I trust you? Nijoni set down her glass, meeting his gaze unflinchingly. Because you felt it too, Wakan. The moment we touched, the connection when we shifted together. This is bigger than both of us. Before Wakan could respond, a sharp knock at the door interrupted them. Ahanu's voice came through, tight with concern. Nijoni, are you all right? They won't let me in. Wakan's posture tensed, his eyes flashing with a hint of gold. Your brother. Nijoni nodded. He doesn't know everything. About the curse, about what I can do. I've kept him in the dark to protect him. A look of understanding passed between them. Wakan moved to the door, opening it to reveal a visibly agitated Ahanu. Mr. Grey Wolf, Ahanu said, his tone clipped. I need to speak with my sister. Of course, Wakan replied smoothly. Please come in. We were just discussing the unfortunate events of this morning. As Ahanu entered, his eyes darted around the destroyed office before settling on Nijoni. What happened? Are you hurt? Nijoni forced a reassuring smile. I'm fine, Ahanu. Just a little shaken up. Mr. Grey Wolf protected me. Ahanu's gaze shifted between Nijoni and Wakan, suspicion evident in his posture. Protected you? How exactly? Did you manage that, Mr. Grey Wolf? I heard gunshots. The tension in the room ratcheted up a notch. Nijoni could see Wakan's jaw clench, the careful mask of the CEO slipping ever so slightly. Perhaps, Wakan said carefully. This is a conversation best had in private. Family matters, after all. Ahanu's eyes narrowed. What are you implying? Nijoni stepped between them, sensing the growing hostility. Ahanu, please. There's a lot I need to tell you, but not here. Not now. Her brother's face softened slightly, concern overriding his suspicion. Nij, what's going on? You've been acting strange for weeks, and now this? I'm worried about you. The raw emotion in Ahanu's voice tugged at Nijoni's heart. She had kept so much from him, trying to shield him from the truth of their heritage. But now, with the prophecy unfolding around them, she realized that keeping secrets had only put him in more danger. I promise I'll explain everything, she said softly. But right now, I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Ahanu hesitated, his gaze flicking once more to Wakan before settling back on his sister. Finally, he nodded. Always, little sister. But this explanation better be good. As Ahanu stepped back, allowing Nijoni and Wakan a moment of privacy, the air seemed to crackle with unspoken tension. We need to meet, Wakan said in a low voice. Tonight. There's a place in the Adirondacks, neutral ground. Bring the Sky Stone. Nijoni nodded, her heart racing at the implications. And you'll Bring the truth, all of it? Wakan's eyes bore into hers, a storm of emotion swirling in their depths. All of it. It's time to end this dance of secrets, Nijoni, for better or worse. As she turned to leave with Ahanu, Nijoni felt the weight of destiny settling on her shoulders. The path ahead was fraught with danger, filled with truths that could shatter both their worlds. But as she cast one last glance at Wakan, she saw in his eyes a reflection of her own determination. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Two alphas, bound by prophecy and drawn together by forces beyond their control. The stage was set for a confrontation that would change everything. As the elevator doors closed, separating Nijoni from Wakan, she sent up a silent prayer to her ancestors. "Guide us," she whispered. "For the sake of both our packs, guide us true." The descent began, both literal and metaphorical, as Nijoni steeled herself for the revelations to come. Tonight, under the light of the moon, ancient magics would awaken, and the true test of their strength and their hearts would begin. Dusk settled over the Adirondack Mountains, painting the sky in hues of deep purple and fiery orange. Nijoni stood at the edge of a clearing, the sky stone a comforting weight in her pocket. The air was thick with the scent of pine and something older, wilder, a reminder of the ancient magics that slumbered in these forests. Beside her, Ahanu shifted restlessly, still reeling from the revelations of the afternoon. "I still can't believe it," he murmured. "All this time we've been... what? Werewolves." Nijoni smiled softly. "Shifters, technically, and not all of us. The gift, or curse, depending on how you look at it, only manifests in certain bloodlines." "Like yours," Ahanu said, a hint of bitterness in his voice. "And potentially yours," Nijoni countered. "It often skips generations. That's why I've been watching you so closely, why I tried to keep you away from all this." Before Ahanu could respond, a twig snapped in the darkness. Both siblings tensed, their senses on high alert. From the shadows emerged Wakan, his presence, somehow even more commanding in the wilderness than it had been in his corporate office. "You came," Wakan said, his amber eyes locking onto Nijoni's. "And you brought company." Nijoni stepped forward. "My brother deserves to know the truth, all of it." Wakan nodded, his gaze shifting to Ahanu. "Very well. But first, we should move to more appropriate surroundings." He led them deeper into the forest, to a small clearing dominated by a circle of ancient standing stones. As they crossed the threshold, Nijoni felt a ripple of energy wash over her, as if they'd stepped into another world entirely. "Welcome," Wakan said, his voice taking on a ceremonial tone. "To the heart of the pack. This place has been sacred to my people for generations." Ahanu looked around in awe. "It's incredible. I can almost feel the history here." "More than history," Nijoni murmured, the sky stone pulsing warmly in her hand. "This place is alive with magic." Wakan moved to the center of the circle, his form seeming to shimmer in the fading light. "It's time for truth, Nijoni Blackhorse." "Show me the sky stone." With trembling fingers, Nijoni withdrew the artifact. In the presence of the standing stones, it glowed with an inner light, casting eerie shadows across their faces. "By the spirits," Wakan breathed. "It's real. After all these years." He reached out, his fingers brushing against the stone. The moment they made contact, a shockwave of energy burst forth, knocking all three of them off their feet. As Nijoni struggled to her knees, gasping for breath, the world around them seemed to shift and blur. Ghostly images flickered in the air, scenes from a shared past long forgotten. They saw two packs, once allies, torn apart by jealousy and betrayal. A powerful shaman, his face contorted with rage, casting a curse that would echo through generations. The sky stone split in two, its power diminished but not destroyed. "Our ancestors," Wakan said, his voice filled with wonder and sorrow. "The true story of our feud." Ahanu, wide-eyed and pale, stared at the unfolding scenes. This is impossible, but Nijoni knew it was all too real. As the visions faded, she felt a new certainty settle over her. "This is why we're here," she said. "To heal this ancient wound, to bring our packs together again." Wakan nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving Nizhoni's face. "The prophecy speaks of two alphas, bound by blood and destiny. It must be us." A low growl rumbled from Ahanu's chest, startling all of them. His eyes flashed golden in the darkness. "No," he snarled, his voice deeper, more primal than Nizhoni had ever heard it. "This isn't right. You can't trust him, Nij." Realization dawned on Nizhoni. "Ahanu, you're shifting." But her brother was beyond words now. With a roar of pain and rage, Ahanu's body began to contort, bones cracking and reshaping as fur sprouted across his skin. In moments, a massive wolf stood where her brother had been, its coat a rich dark brown. Wakan moved protectively in, front of Nizhoni. "The first shift is always the hardest," he said urgently. "He's not in control. We need to—" But Ahanu was already lunging, teeth bared and claws extended. Wakan met him halfway, his own shift happening in the blink of an eye. The two wolves collided in a fury of snapping jaws and flying fur. Nizhoni watched in horror as her brother and the man who might be her destiny fought viciously. The skystone pulsed in her hand, its energy building to a fever pitch. "Stop!" she cried out, her voice carrying a power she didn't know she possessed. "This isn't the way." As if in response to her command, the standing stones began to hum, ancient glyphs glowing along their surfaces. The ground beneath their feet trembled, and a blinding light erupted from the center of the circle. When the light faded, Nizhoni found herself face to face with a spectral figure, an old woman with eyes that held the wisdom of ages. "Grandmother," Nizhoni whispered, recognizing the spirit from childhood memories. The apparition smiled sadly. "The time has come, little one. The choice you make tonight will shape the destiny of both packs for generations to come." As Wakan and Ahanu circled each other, still in wolf form but momentarily stilled by the supernatural presence, Nizhoni felt the weight of history pressing down upon her. "What must I do?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Her grandmother's spirit gestured to the feuding wolves. "Heal the rift, or let it destroy you all. The power is in your hands, Nizhoni. But remember, true strength comes not from dominance, but from understanding." With those cryptic words, the spirit faded, leaving Nizhoni alone to face the snarling wolves and the destiny that awaited her. Heart pounding, she stepped between Wakan and Ahanu, the skystone held high. "Enough," she commanded, her voice ringing with authority. "It's time to end this once and for all." As the stone's light engulfed them, Nizhoni knew that whatever happened next would change their lives forever. The dance of deception was over. Now it was time for truth, reconciliation, and the fulfillment of an ancient prophecy. In that moment, suspended between past and future, Nizhoni embraced her role as the bridge between two worlds. Whatever the cost, she would see this through. For her brother, for Wakan, and for the generations of both packs who had suffered under the weight of a centuries-old curse. The true test of her strength, and her heart, had only just begun. Ethereal light pulsed from the skystone, enveloping Nizhoni, Wakan, and Ahanu in a cocoon of ancient magic. The air crackled with energy, heavy with the weight of centuries, of conflict and hidden truths. As the light intensified, Nizhoni felt a surge of power coursing through her veins, awakening something primal and long dormant within her soul. Closing her eyes, she surrendered to the flood of images and emotions that washed over her. Generations of both packs flashed before her mind's eye, their triumphs, their sorrows, their shared history. She saw the moment the curse was cast, felt the anguish of families torn apart, and understood the deep-seated fear that had kept both sides locked in a dance of mutual distrust for so long. When Nizhoni opened her eyes, she found herself in a misty realm between worlds. Wakan and Ahanu stood before her, no longer in wolf form but as men, their spirits laid bare. "Do you see now?" she asked softly, her voice echoing in the ethereal space. "We've been fighting the wrong battle all along." Ahanu, his eyes wide with wonder and confusion, stepped forward. Nij, I remember things I've never experienced. The pain, the loss. Wakan nodded solemnly. The burden of our ancestors. We've carried it for so long, we forgot there was ever another way. Nijoni held out her hands, one to each of them. It's time to break the cycle, to heal the wounds of the past and forge a new future, but I can't do it alone. Will you stand with me? For a moment, tension crackled between the two men. Years of ingrained hostility warred against the newfound understanding. Then, slowly, Wakan reached out and clasped Nijoni's hand. For the sake of both our packs, he said, his voice husky with emotion. I will. Ahanu hesitated, his gaze darting between his sister and Wakan. How can we trust him, Nij? After everything his family has done? Nijoni squeezed her brother's shoulder. Because it's not about trust, Ahanu. It's about faith. Faith in our ability to change, to grow beyond the limits of our past. With a deep breath, Ahanu took Nijoni's other hand. The moment their circle was complete, the skystone flared with blinding intensity. A shockwave of energy exploded outward, shattering the ethereal realm and catapulting them back to the physical world. They found themselves once again in the stone circle, the first light of dawn breaking over the horizon. But something had fundamentally changed. The air itself seemed lighter, as if a great burden had been lifted from the land. Nijoni staggered, overwhelmed by the rush of power. Wakan caught her before she could fall, his touch sending sparks of electricity through her body. It's done, she whispered, looking up into his amber eyes. The curse. I can feel it breaking. Wakan nodded, a look of awe on his face. I feel it too. It's like waking up from a long nightmare. Ahanu, still processing the magnitude of what had transpired, cleared his throat. So what happens now? We just forget centuries of hatred and become one big happy pack? Nijoni shook her head, a wry smile on her lips. It won't be that. Simple, there's a lot of healing to be done on both sides. But this is a start. As if on cue, the sound of howls echoed through the forest. First one, then another, until the air was filled with a chorus of lupine voices. Members of both packs, drawn by the surge of ancient magic, were converging on their location. Wakan straightened, his alpha presence reasserting itself. They'll have questions, concerns. It's our job to guide them through this transition. Nijoni nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. We'll need to be united, to show them that change is possible. As the first of the pack members began to emerge from the trees, human and wolf forms alike, Wakan turned to Nijoni. His eyes, usually so guarded, now shone with a mix of vulnerability and hope. There's something else, he said softly. The prophecy spoke not just of uniting the packs, but of a union between alphas. A joining of bloodlines to seal the peace. Nijoni's heart raced, understanding the implication. Are you saying? Wakan took her hand, his touch sending shivers down her spine. I'm saying that fate brought us together for a reason, Nijoni. Blackhorse and I, for one, am tired of fighting destiny. Before she could respond, a commotion from the gathered pack members drew their attention. An elderly woman, her silver hair gleaming in the dawn light, pushed her way to the front of the crowd. It's true then, she said, her voice quavering, with emotion. The curse is broken. I can feel the change in my bones. Murmurs rippled through the assembled shifters, a mix of excitement, fear, and cautious hope. Nijoni recognized the moment for what it was, a turning point that would define the future of both packs. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward, Wakan at her side and Ahanu close behind. My brothers and sisters, she began, her voice carrying across the clearing. Today marks the dawn of a new era for our people. The wounds of the past run deep, but together, we have the power to heal them. As she spoke, Nijoni felt a surge of confidence. This was her destiny. Not just to break the curse, but to lead her people into a brighter future. With Wakan beside her, bridging the gap between their once warring factions, anything seemed possible. The sun climbed higher in the sky, its warmth chasing away the last vestiges of night. As Nijoni looked out over the sea of faces, some familiar, some strange, but all connected by an ancient legacy, she knew that the greatest challenge was yet to come. Uniting the packs was only the beginning. Now, they had to forge a new identity, one that honored their shared past while embracing the possibilities of the future. And through it all, she and Wakan would need to navigate their own evolving relationship, balancing duty with the undeniable pull between them. The dance of deception had ended, but a new dance was just beginning, one of diplomacy, reconciliation, and perhaps even love. As Nijoni squeezed Wakan's hand, drawing strength from his presence, she smiled. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The curse was broken, the truth was out, and the real adventure was only just beginning. Weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity as the two packs grappled with their newfound unity. The Adirondack compound, once Wakan's private retreat, now bustled with life as it became the epicenter of their integration efforts. Nijoni found herself at the heart of it all, mediating disputes, soothing fears, and helping to forge new bonds between former adversaries. On a crisp autumn morning, Nijoni stood on the balcony of the main lodge, watching as members of both packs mingled in the courtyard below. The sight brought a smile to her face, though it couldn't entirely erase the worry lines that had taken up permanent residence between her brows. "Penny for your thoughts?" Wakan's deep voice startled her from her reverie. He handed her a steaming mug of coffee, his fingers brushing hers in a touch that still sent shivers down her spine. Nijoni sighed, leaning against the railing. "I was just thinking about how far we've come, and how far we still have to go." Wakan nodded, his amber eyes scanning the scene below. "It's not perfect, but it's progress. A month ago, the idea of gray wolves and black horses sharing a meal together would have been unthinkable." "True," Nijoni conceded, "but we're still walking a tightrope. One wrong move and all of this could come crashing down." As if to underscore her point, raised voices drifted up from the courtyard. Two young wolves, one from each pack, were squaring off, their body language tense and aggressive. Before either Nijoni or Wakan could intervene, a Hanu appeared, placing a calming hand on each of the young men's shoulders. Within moments, the tension dissipated, replaced by sheepish grins and a grudging handshake. "Your brother has surprised us all," Wakan mused. "He's become quite the peacemaker." Nijoni smiled fondly. "He's always had it in him. He just needed the right motivation." As they watched, Ahanu glanced up, catching their eye. He gave a small nod before turning back to the group, guiding them towards the training grounds. "Speaking of motivation," Wakan said, his tone shifting to something more serious, "we need to discuss the council meeting tomorrow." Nijoni tensed. The Council of Elders, comprised of respected members from both packs, had been established to help govern their new unified society. But old prejudices died hard, and every meeting was a delicate balancing act. "What's on the agenda?" she asked, though she had a sinking feeling she already knew. Wakan's jaw tightened. "They want to discuss succession, the future leadership of the United Packs." "Ah," Nijoni breathed. "And I suppose they have opinions on that?" "To put it mildly," Wakan growled, "there's a faction pushing for a traditional approach, a mated pair of alphas to lead." The implication hung heavy in the air between them. Since that fateful night in the stone circle, Nijoni and Wakan's relationship had been a complex dance of attraction, duty, and cautious exploration. They worked seamlessly together as leaders, but the personal aspect of their connection remained largely uncharted territory. "And what do you think?" Nijoni asked, her heart racing despite her effort to keep her voice steady. Wakan turned, to face her fully, his eyes intense. "I think that what's between us goes beyond politics or prophecies. But I also think that rushing into anything for the sake of appeasing the council would be a mistake." Nijoni nodded, a mix of relief and disappointment washing over her. "I agree. We owe it to our people, and to ourselves, to be sure." "That being said," Wakan continued, taking a step closer, I don't want to ignore what's growing between us either. His proximity was intoxicating, the heat of his body a stark contrast to the cool autumn air. Nijoni found herself leaning in, drawn by an invisible force. Wakan, A sharp knock at the door interrupted the moment. They sprang apart. As Ahanu entered, his expression grim. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, his eyes darting between them knowingly. "But we have a situation." A group of hunters was attacked on the eastern border. They're saying it was a rogue wolf. The spell broken, Nijoni and Wakan snapped into leadership mode. "Any casualties?" Wakan asked, already moving towards the door. Ahanu shook his head. "Minor injuries only, thankfully, but the hunters are demanding answers and protection." "Gather the senior pack members," Nijoni instructed. "We need to form a search party and increase patrols along the border." As they hurried down to the main hall, Nijoni's mind raced. A rogue wolf was the last thing they needed right now. It could shatter the fragile peace they'd worked so hard to build. The main hall was already buzzing with activity when they arrived. Pack members from both sides huddled in tense groups, whispered conversations stopping abruptly as Nijoni and Wakan entered. "Listen up," Wakan's voice boomed, commanding instant attention. "We have a potential threat to our territory and our people. I need volunteers for a search party." As hands raised and a team began to form, Nijoni studied the faces around her. Fear, anger, determination, but also unity. In that moment, she realized that despite their differences, the packs were truly becoming one. "Whatever's out there," she addressed the crowd, "we'll face it together. Not as gray wolves or black horses, but as a single, united pack." A chorus of agreement rose from the assembled shifters. As they moved into action, organizing teams and strategizing, Nijoni felt a surge of pride. They had come so far in such a short time, but as she caught Wakan's eye across the room, she knew that their greatest challenges, both as leaders and as individuals, were still to come. The rogue wolf, the council's pressure, the simmering attraction between them. All were pieces of a complex puzzle they had yet to solve. As the search party prepared to depart, Nijoni squared her shoulders. Whatever threats lay ahead, internal or external, she was ready to face them. With Wakan by her side and their newfound unity as a foundation, she believed they could overcome anything. The true test of their leadership and their hearts was about to begin. The forest was alive with tension as Nijoni led her team through the dense undergrowth. The scent of pine mingled with something darker, more primal, the unmistakable musk of a rogue wolf. Beside her, Wakan moved with fluid grace, his heightened senses on full alert. They had been tracking the intruder for hours, following a trail of broken branches and disturbed earth. The rest of the search party fanned out behind them, a mix of gray wolves and black horses working in perfect synchronicity. Suddenly, Wakan froze, his nostrils flaring. "There," he whispered, pointing to a shadowy ravine ahead. Nijoni nodded, signaling the others to hold position. With practiced ease, she and Wakan shifted forms, their bodies contorting and reshaping until two powerful wolves stood where humans had been moments before. As they crept forward, a guttural growl echoed from the darkness. A massive wolf, its coat matted and eyes wild, burst from the undergrowth. But instead of attacking, it turned tail and fled deeper into the forest. Without hesitation, Nijoni and Wakan gave chase. They raced through the trees, leaping over fallen logs and darting around boulders. The rogue was fast, but they were faster, driven by the need to protect their pack. Just as they were closing in, the ground beneath their paws gave way. Nijoni yelped in surprise as she and Wakan tumbled down a steep embankment, landing in a tangle of limbs at the bottom of a hidden ravine. Dazed, they shifted back to human form, checking each other for injuries. "Are you all right?" Wakan asked, his hands gently probing for broken bones. Nijoni nodded, trying to ignore the spark of electricity his touch ignited. "I'm fine. But where's the—" Her words died in her throat as she took in their surroundings. They had landed in what appeared to be an ancient ceremonial site. Standing, Stones, weathered by time but still bearing faint traces of carvings, formed a perfect circle around them. By the spirits, Wakan breathed. I've heard stories of this place, but I never thought. A low chuckle interrupted him. From the shadows emerged an elderly man, his weather-beaten face creased with amusement. Well, well, he said, his voice gravelly with age. It seems the prophecy has finally come to pass. Nijoni and Wakan scrambled to their feet, instinctively, moving into defensive positions. Who are you? Nijoni demanded. And what do you know about the prophecy? The old man's eyes twinkled with mischief. I am many things, child. Guardian, keeper of secrets, watcher of the old ways. But you may call me Akacheta. Wakan's eyes widened in recognition. The lost Alpha, he whispered. But you disappeared. Decades ago. Everyone thought you were dead. Akacheta shrugged, leaning heavily on a gnarled staff. Sometimes the best way to watch over something is from the shadows. I've been waiting a long time for you two to find your way here. Nijoni's mind raced, connecting pieces of a puzzle she hadn't even known existed. The rogue wolf. That was you, wasn't it? You led us here deliberately. The old man nodded, a sly smile playing at his lips. Sharp as a tack, this one. Yes, I orchestrated this little adventure. It was time for you to learn the final piece of the puzzle. What puzzle? Wakan asked, frustration evident in his voice. We broke the curse. We united the packs. What more is there? Akacheta's expression grew serious. Breaking the curse was only the beginning, young Alpha. The true test lies ahead. Tell me, have you completed the bonding ritual? Nijoni and Wakan exchanged uncomfortable glances. We haven't, Nijoni admitted. Things have been complicated. Ah, youth, Akacheta sighed. Always making simple things difficult. The bonding of your bloodlines isn't just about politics or pack dynamics, it's about balance, harmony. The very fabric of our world depends on it. As if to emphasize his point, the ground beneath their feet began to tremble. The standing stones hummed with energy, ancient glyphs glowing with an eerie light. What's happening? Nijoni gasped, reaching for Wakan's hand instinctively. Akacheta's voice took on a rhythmic, chanting quality. The veil between worlds grows thin, the ancient powers stir. Without the bond of true alphas to anchor them, chaos will reign. Images flashed before their eyes, visions of pack members turning feral, of humans discovering their secret, of a world torn apart by supernatural forces unleashed. You must complete the ritual, Akacheta urged. Here, in this sacred place, only then can the balance be restored. Wakan turned to Nijoni, his eyes blazing with a mix of fear and determination. Nijoni, I know we said we needed time, but... She silenced him with a finger to his lips. I know. I feel it too. This is bigger than us, bigger than our fears. Or doubts. As the energy around them intensified, Nijoni and Wakan stood face to face in the center of the stone circle. Akacheta began to chant in an ancient tongue, his words seeming to weave a spell around them. Are you ready? Wakan asked softly, his hands cupping Nijoni's face. She nodded, her heart racing. With you? Always. Their lips met in a kiss that felt like coming home and embarking on a great adventure all at once. As they embraced, the power surged, enveloping them in a cocoon of pure energy. Nijoni felt as if her very essence was merging with Wakan's. Memories, emotions, strengths, and weaknesses flowed between them. In that moment, she understood him completely, and knew she was understood in return. When the light faded and they finally broke apart, gasping for air, the world seemed changed. Colors were brighter, scents sharper. They could feel the pulse of the earth beneath their feet, the whisper of the wind in the trees. Akacheta smiled, looking younger somehow. It is done. The balance is restored. As the implications of what had just occurred sank in, Nijoni and Wakan shared a look of wonder and newfound intimacy. They were bonded now, in a way that went beyond mere words or ceremonies. But even as joy and relief washed over them, a new sense of responsibility settled on their shoulders. They were no longer just leaders of a united pack. They were guardians of an ancient power, protectors of the delicate balance between worlds. As howls of their search party echoed in the distance, Nijoni squeezed Wakan's hand. Ready to face our new reality? He brought her hand to his lips, kissing it tenderly. As long as we're facing it together. With a nod of gratitude to Akacheta, they began the climb out of the ravine. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges they could scarcely imagine. But they would face it, as one, bonded alphas, united in purpose and in love. The true adventure, it seemed, was only just beginning. The Adirondack compound was abuzz with excitement and nervous energy, as Nijoni and Wakan returned. Word of their bonding had spread quickly, carried on the mystical currents that connected all members of the pack. As they approached the main lodge, a crowd gathered, faces a mix of awe, curiosity, and lingering uncertainty. Ahanu pushed through the throng, his expression a storm of emotions. "Nij," he said, pulling his sister into a tight embrace before stepping back to eye her. Critically, "You look different." Nijoni smiled, feeling the new power humming beneath her skin. "I feel different, brother. But in a good way." Wakan cleared his throat, addressing the assembled pack members. "We have much to discuss. Council members, please convene in the Great Hall. The rest of you return to your duties. We'll address everyone once we've had a chance to process recent events." As the crowd dispersed, murmuring excitedly, Nijoni caught sight of a familiar face hanging back. "Akecheta," she called out. "Will you join us?" The old man nodded, a knowing glint in his eye as he followed them into the lodge. Inside the Great Hall, the atmosphere was tense. Elder council members from both former packs sat around a massive oak table, their expressions guarded. "So," began Margaret, a respected elder from the Werewolf clan, "the rumors are true. You've completed the bonding ritual." Wakan nodded, his hand finding Nijoni's under the table. "We have, and in doing so, we've discovered that our union is about far more than just pack politics." Over the next hour, they recounted their experience in the hidden ravine, with Akacheta offering context and ancient lore. As understanding dawned on the council members' faces, a mix of reverence and concern replaced their earlier skepticism. "This changes everything," mused Dakota, an elder from the Black Horse side. "If what you say is true, the responsibilities we bear extend far beyond our own pack." Nijoni leaned forward, her voice firm. "Which is why we need to accelerate our integration efforts. We can't afford internal strife when there are greater forces at play." Discussion erupted around the table, plans being formed and debated. As the meeting wore on, Nijoni found her newfound abilities both a blessing and a curse. She could sense the underlying emotions of each council member, their fears and hopes laid bare to her heightened perceptions. Suddenly, a commotion outside the hall caught everyone's attention. The doors burst open, revealing a breathless young pack member. "Alphas," he gasped. "There's been an incident in town. A human child. She saw one of ours shift." The room fell silent, the gravity of the situation settling over them like a heavy cloak. This was precisely the kind of chaos Akacheta had warned about. The veil between worlds thinning, their secrets in danger of exposure. Wakan stood, his voice resonating with authority. "Nijoni and I will handle this personally. Ahanu, assemble, a small team to accompany us. The rest of you maintain calm in the compound. We can't afford panic." As they prepared to leave, Akacheta approached, his wizened face grave. "Remember," he said softly, "your bond gives you power, but it also connects you to the very fabric of our world. Use it wisely." Nijoni nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. As they stepped out into the crisp autumn air, she turned to Wakan. "Are you ready for this?" He squeezed her hand, his eyes reflecting the determination she felt. "Together, we can face anything." The drive into town was tense, filled with strategizing and worst-case scenarios. As they approached the outskirts of the small mountain community, Nijoni reached out with her newfound senses, trying to locate the source of the disturbance. There, she said suddenly, pointing to a small park. I can feel fear, confusion, and something else. Curiosity, maybe? They pulled over, approaching the area cautiously. In a secluded corner of the park, they found a young girl, no more than 7 or 8, talking animatedly to a police officer. Beside them stood a familiar face, Liam, one of the younger pack members known for his impulsive nature. Wakan stepped forward, his presence immediately commanding attention. Officer, he said smoothly, I'm Wakan Greywolf. I believe there's been some confusion here. The officer looked relieved to see him. Mr. Greywolf, thank goodness. This young lady has quite the imagination. She's claiming she saw this man turn into a wolf. Nijoni knelt down beside the girl, reaching out with her empathic abilities to project calm and reassurance. That must have been very exciting, she said gently. Can you tell me more about what you saw? As the child launched into her tale, Nijoni wove a subtle spell with her words, blurring the lines between reality and fantasy in the girl's mind. By the time she finished speaking, the wolf had become a large dog, the transformation nothing more than a trick of the light. The officer chuckled, shaking his head. Kids and their stories, eh? No harm done, I suppose. Mr. Greywolf, I assume you can handle things from here? Wakan nodded, his charm on full display. Of course, officer. Thank you for your diligence. We'll make sure everyone gets home safely. As the police car pulled away, Nijoni turned to Liam, her expression stern. We'll discuss this back at the compound. For now, go with Ahanu. And no more shifts outside of designated areas, understood? Liam nodded, looking thoroughly chastised. As Ahanu led him away, Wakan knelt beside the young girl. What's your name, little one? Lily, she said, her eyes wide with wonder. Wakan smiled, his voice gentle. Well, Lily, you've had quite an adventure today. But it's important to remember that sometimes our imagination can play tricks on us. Why don't we get you home to your parents? As they walked Lily back to her house, Nijoni marveled at the delicate balance they now had to maintain. The power to shape perceptions, to protect their secret, was both a gift and a tremendous responsibility. Later that night, as they debriefed the council on the incident, Nijoni felt the first real stirrings of doubt. We can't keep covering our tracks forever, she said softly to Wakan. Sooner or later, the truth will come out. He nodded, his expression thoughtful. Then we need to be ready, to find a way to bridge our world with theirs on our own terms. As the meeting adjourned, plans being set in motion for stricter protocols and increased vigilance, Nijoni and Wakan found themselves alone in the Great Hall. The events of the past few days weighed heavily upon them. Are we doing the right thing? Nijoni asked, vulnerability creeping into her voice. Keeping our existence a secret, manipulating memories. Wakan pulled her close, his warmth a comfort in the face of uncertainty. We're doing what we must to protect our people. But you're right, we need to find a better way. And we will together. As they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, Nijoni felt the bond between them pulse with shared purpose and love. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever difficult decisions they would face, they would navigate them as one. The path forward was unclear, fraught with danger and ethical dilemmas. But as the first stars appeared in the night sky, Nijoni felt a glimmer of hope. With their bond, their united pack, and their unwavering determination, perhaps they could forge a future where both worlds could coexist in harmony. The real work, it seemed, was only just beginning. Months passed, and the united pack settled into a new rhythm. Under Nijoni and Wakan's leadership, integration efforts flourished, and the once bitter rivals began to forge genuine bonds of friendship and loyalty. But as winter's icy grip tightened around the Adirondacks, new challenges emerged that would test the strength of their newfound unity. Nijoni stood at the edge of a frozen lake, her breath misting in the frigid air. Beside her, Wakan's warmth was a stark contrast to the biting cold. They watched as pack members, both Greywolf and Blackhorse, participated in an ancient winter ritual, a test of endurance that involved plunging into the icy waters. They're working well together, Wakan observed, a note of pride in his voice. Nizhoni nodded, but her expression remained troubled. Yes, but for how long? We've managed to keep our secret so far, but the incidents are becoming more frequent. The veil is thinning, just as Akacheta warned. Before Wakan could respond, a commotion erupted near the lake's edge. Two young wolves, one from each former pack, were squaring off, their heated argument a stark contrast to the winter chill. Nizhoni and Wakan moved swiftly, their enhanced abilities allowing them to cross the distance in mere seconds. As they approached, they could hear snippets of the argument. Your fault. If you hadn't been so careless. Me? You're the one who nearly exposed us to those hikers. Wakan's voice cut through the tension like a whip crack. Enough. The two young men fell silent, their heads bowing instinctively before their alphas. Nizhoni stepped forward, her voice gentle but firm. Explain. The taller of the two, a gray wolf named Ethan, spoke first. We were running patrol along the eastern border when we caught the scent of humans. Trey here thought it would be fun to give them a scare by howling nearby. Trey, the black horse, bristled. They were too close to our territory. I was just trying to make them leave. Nizhoni exchanged a look with Wakan, their bond allowing for silent communication. This was exactly the kind of reckless behavior they'd been working to prevent. Both of you come with us, Wakan commanded. The rest of you continue with the ritual. Ahanu, charge until we return. As they made their way back to the compound, Nizhoni felt a familiar presence brush against her consciousness. She turned to see Akacheta emerging from the tree line, his expression grave. The balance grows more precarious, the old shaman said without preamble. The human world presses closer and our own people grow restless. The time for half measures has passed. Wakan frowned. What are you suggesting? Akacheta's eyes gleamed with ancient wisdom. It is time to awaken the full extent of your bonded powers, to embrace your roles not just as leaders of a pack, but as guardians of two worlds. Nizhoni felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the cold. And how do we do that? Follow me, Akacheta said, turning back towards the forest. There is something you must see. Leaving Ethan and Trey in Ahanu's capable hands, Nizhoni and Wakan followed the shaman deep into the wilderness. As they walked, the very air seemed to change, becoming charged with mystical energy. Finally, they emerged into a hidden grove. At its center stood an ancient tree, its gnarled branches reaching towards the sky like grasping fingers. Carved into its trunk was a series of intricate symbols that seemed to shimmer and move in the fading light. This is the heart tree, Akacheta explained. It has stood here since the first shifters walked these lands. Within its roots lie the secrets of our kind, and the key to bridging the gap between our world and that of humans. Wakan stepped forward, his hand outstretched. As his fingers brushed the bark, he gasped. I can feel everything. The pulse of the earth, the whispers of the wind. Nizhoni joined him, and the moment her skin made contact with the tree, a flood of images and sensations washed over her. She saw generations of shifters, living in harmony with the land. She saw the first encounters with humans, the fear and mistrust that grew over time, and she saw glimpses of a possible future, one where shifters and humans coexisted openly, their strengths complementing each other. As the vision faded, Nizhoni turned to Akacheta. What does this mean? What are we supposed to do? The old shaman smiled enigmatically. That, young alphas, is for you to decide. The heart tree has shown you the past and a potential future. How you bridge that gap is up to you. As they made their way back to the compound, Nizhoni and Wakan walked in thoughtful silence, their minds reeling from the experience. The weight of their responsibility had never felt heavier, but neither had the possibility for real, lasting change. Entering the main lodge, they found the council already assembled, their faces etched with concern. Ahanu stepped forward, his expression grim. We have a situation, he said without preamble. A human research team has set up camp just outside our territory. They're studying local wildlife patterns, using advanced tracking technology. The implications hung heavy in the air. Their traditional methods of staying hidden might not be enough against modern science. Wakan's jaw tightened. We need to move them out of the area, discreetly. But Nijoni, her mind still filled with the visions from the heart tree, held up a hand. Wait. Maybe this is an opportunity. All eyes turned to her, a mix of confusion and curiosity on their faces. We've been hiding for centuries, Nijoni continued, her voice gaining strength, always living in fear of discovery. But what if there's another way? What if, instead of pushing humans away, we found a way to work with them? Murmurs of dissent rippled through the room, but Wakan stepped to Nijoni's side, his support unwavering. She's right. We can't keep living in the shadows forever. It's time we controlled our own narrative. For hours they debated. Plans were proposed and discarded, fears voiced and addressed. As the first light of dawn crept through the windows, a tentative agreement was reached. They would approach the research team, not as adversaries but as potential allies. Using their influence in the human world, Wakan's business connections and Nijoni's scientific background, they would guide the research, slowly introducing the idea that there might be more to the local wildlife than met the eye. It was a risky plan, one that could backfire spectacularly. But as Nijoni looked around the room at the faces of her pack, Werewolf and Black Horse alike, she saw hope beginning to replace fear. As the meeting adjourned, Wakan pulled Nijoni close. "Are you sure about this?" he asked softly. "Once we start down this path, there's no going back." Nijoni nodded, feeling the strength of their bond pulsing between them. "I'm sure. It won't be easy, but it's the right thing to do. For our pack, for future generations, and for the balance between worlds." Wakan smiled, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. "Then we'll face it together, as we've faced everything else." As they stepped out into the crisp morning air, Nijoni felt a sense of anticipation building. They stood on the precipice of a new era, one that would require all their strength, wisdom, and love to navigate. But with their bond, their united pack, and the ancient power of the heart tree guiding them, Nijoni believed that anything was possible. The true test of their leadership, and of Shifterkind's place in the world, was about to begin. The crisp autumn air carried a sense of anticipation as Nijoni and Wakan stood at the edge of the forest, watching the approaching vehicles. It had been a year since they'd made the monumental decision to gradually reveal their existence to the human world, and today marked a pivotal moment in that journey. Dr. Elena Castillo, the lead researcher they had carefully cultivated a relationship with over the past months, stepped out of the lead SUV. Her team followed, their faces a mix of excitement and apprehension. "Ms. Blackhorse, Mr. Greywolf," Elena greeted them, her voice steady despite the nervousness Nijoni could sense radiating from her. "We're ready when you are." Wakan nodded, his presence exuding calm authority. "Thank you for coming, Dr. Castillo. What you're about to see will change everything you thought you knew about the natural world. Are you prepared for that?" Elena took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. "We are." As they led the research team deeper into the forest, Nijoni felt the watchful eyes of pack members hidden among the trees. This controlled revelation had been meticulously planned, with safeguards in place should anything go wrong. But still, the risk was enormous. They arrived at a clearing where Akacheta waited, looking more like the ancient shaman he truly was than the feeble old man he often portrayed. Beside him stood a Hanu and a select group of pack members who had volunteered for this historic moment. "Welcome," Akacheta intoned, his voice carrying a weight of centuries. "You stand at the threshold of a world hidden in plain sight. Are you ready to see with new eyes?" The researchers murmured their assent, cameras and scientific equipment at the ready. Nijoni and Wakan exchanged a glance, their bond thrumming with shared resolve. It was time. "What you are about to witness," Wakan began, "is not a trick or an illusion. It is the truth of who we are." With that, he began to shift. His form blurred and changed, bones realigning and fur sprouting until a majestic silver wolf stood where the man had been. Gasps and exclamations of shock rippled through the research team. One by one, The other pack members followed suit, each transformation eliciting new waves of astonishment from the humans. Nijoni was the last to shift, her midnight black fur, a stark contrast to Wakan's silver. For a long moment, silence reigned in the clearing. Then, Elena stepped forward, her hand outstretched in wonder. "Incredible," she breathed. You're really—" Nijoni shifted back, her voice gentle but firm. "We are shifters, Dr. Castillo. We have lived alongside humans for millennia, hiding our true nature out of fear and necessity. But we believe it's time for that to change." What followed was a day filled with questions, demonstrations, and carefully controlled scientific observations. The research team, once they moved past their initial shock, proved to be respectful and genuinely curious. By nightfall, as they prepared to leave with the first batch of groundbreaking data, Elena approached Nijoni and Wakan. "Thank you," she said, her eyes shining with emotion, "for trusting us with this. I promise we'll handle this information with the utmost care and responsibility." Wakan nodded solemnly. "We're counting on that, Dr. Castillo. The future of both our kinds depends on it." As the SUVs disappeared down the forest road, Nijoni leaned into Wakan's embrace. "Do you think we did the right thing?" she asked softly. He kissed the top of her head, his voice rumbling in his chest. "I do. It won't be easy, but it's a step towards the future we saw in the Heart Tree's vision." Akacheta approached, his wizened face creased in a rare smile. "You have done well, young alphas. The path ahead is long and fraught with challenges, but you have taken the first crucial step." As if to underscore his words, a howl rose from the forest, soon joined by another and another, until the night air was filled with the voices of their pack. It was a song of hope, of unity, and of a future where two worlds could coexist. In harmony, months passed, and the carefully controlled release of information about shifters sent ripples through the scientific community and beyond. There were skeptics, of course, and those who reacted with fear. But there were also many who embraced the revelation with open minds and hearts. Nijoni and Wakan found themselves at the center of a whirlwind of media attention, scientific inquiries, and diplomatic negotiations. They testified before government committees, gave interviews to respected journalists, and worked tirelessly to ensure that the integration of shifters into wider society would be peaceful and mutually beneficial. It wasn't always easy. There were setbacks and moments of doubt. But through it all, their bond remained unshakable, a beacon of strength in uncertain times. One crisp spring morning, almost 2 years to the day since they had first broken the curse that divided their packs, Nijoni and Wakan stood on the balcony of their Adirondack lodge. Below them, the compound bustled with activity, shifters and humans working side by side on joint research projects and cultural exchange programs. "We've come so far," Nijoni mused, her hand resting on her swollen belly. Their child, the firstborn of 2 alphas in generations, was due any day now. Wakan wrapped his arms around her, his touch as electrifying as it had been on that first day in his office. "And we have so much further to go," he said. "But together, I believe, we can face anything." As the sun rose over the mountains, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, Nijoni felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. The dance of deception that had brought them together had evolved into a symphony of truth and unity. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges they could scarcely imagine. But with their love, their pack, and their unwavering commitment to building a better future, she knew they would prevail. The true adventure, it seemed, was only just beginning.